Right, let's just dive straight into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the mind of a guy who's basically known as one of history's biggest curmudgeons. But as we're going to see, the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wasn't just a pessimist. He actually offered incredibly practical, ruthlessly efficient advice for dealing with the absolute chaos of modern life. We're not looking at his work as some depressing critique today. Oh no. We're looking at it as a genuine survival guide to living sensibly in a crazy world. And it all really kicks off by confronting this huge, hovering question. How do you actually avoid having massive regrets when you hit old age? We spend so much of our youth chasing things we're convinced will make us happy, only to realize decades down the line that we were running in completely the wrong direction. Well, Schopenhauer hands us a really blunt, incredibly effective toolkit for finding grounded contentment instead of just chasing fleeting illusions. But to use this toolkit, we first have to accept his fundamental diagnosis of the human condition. And here's that diagnosis. He famously said that life swings like a pendulum, backward and forward, between pain and boredom. Think about it. When we don't have what we ardently want, we feel the sharp pain of desire. But the second we finally get it, boom, we get bored and immediately start looking for the next thing. It's a delightfully cynical way to view our daily struggles, isn't it? But honestly, recognizing this pendulum is the very first step to stopping it from just violently tossing you around. Which brings us to Section 1, the traps of wealth and society. Let's look at what the world falsely promises will actually bring us happiness. This quote brilliantly illustrates his take on our endless obsession with accumulating things. Just think about modern hustle culture for a second, that relentless drive for more money, more followers, more status. Schopenhauer just throws a bucket of cold water on all of it with this vivid warning. He says wealth and fame are exactly like seawater. They don't hydrate you. They literally dehydrate your soul and leave you with this endless, unquenchable thirst. The more you consume, the worse you actually fear. So, if wealth and fame are total traps, what about our obsession with other people? Why are we really so drawn to socializing? Packing our calendars with events, constantly checking in on what everybody else is doing online. It's just the ultimate fear of missing out, right? Well, Schopenhauer has a slightly different and honestly much sharper read on our social drives. It's a cynical but deeply thought-provoking answer. He says we don't necessarily love the crowds. We are just absolutely terrified of being alone with our own thoughts. He went as far as to say that we literally forfeit 3/4 of ourselves just to be like other people. We shave off our unique edges, our true interests, just to fit into the mold of the crowd. All because the alternative, just facing our own minds in total silence, feels way too daunting. Moving right along to Section 2, navigating human relationships. Here is his tactical advice for surviving daily interactions. Because we can't completely escape society, how do we actually deal with the inevitable friction of other people, or as Schopenhauer amazingly called them, the scolding rams of society? I absolutely love this next bit. This is a highly practical, almost comedic 3-step method for dealing with someone you strongly suspect is lying to you. Step 1, do not call them out. Instead, look as though you believe every single word they're saying. Step 2, this fake credulity gives them the courage to keep going. And step 3, as they get more confident, they'll become overly vehement in their assertions, and ultimately, they'll trip over their own fabricated details and betray themselves. It's an absolute masterclass in letting someone dig their own grave while you just stand back and watch the show. Now, obviously, you can't treat everyone like a liar. For general, everyday interactions, he gives us this fantastic metaphor. Politeness softens human nature, just like warmth softens wax. You do not have to love everyone you work with or interact with, but applying a layer of deliberate politeness melts away the friction. It's a literal workplace survival strategy. You aren't being fake, you're just keeping the wax soft so you don't snap under the pressure. To summarize his brutally honest rules of engagement, we have these 3 core tenets. First, don't put people on a pedestal right out of the gate. If you don't form highly favorable opinions at first acquaintance, you won't be severely disappointed later. Simple as that. Second, accept that almost all of our sorrows spring directly from our relations with others. And third, be clever. The clever person doesn't engage in every single argument. They simply sidestep the fuss created by fools. Basically, managing your expectations of others is your ultimate defense mechanism. All right, Section 3, the roots of true value. Let's shift gears from what to avoid to what actually matters. If wealth and popularity are completely out of the picture, what actually holds value? Well, Schopenhauer boldly claimed that a massive 90% of our happiness depends entirely on our physical health. It so far outweighs all other blessings in life that he famously noted a truly healthy beggar is infinitely happier than a sick king. Talk about a reality check. Without that baseline 90%, the other 10%, wealth, status, intellect, it all becomes completely meaningless.
What's really interesting about this approach is the sharp contrast between our modern pursuit of extreme joy and his ancient feeling wisdom. The fool runs around actively chasing intense pleasure, always trying to maximize the highs, and invariably just crashes right into disappointment. The sage, on the other hand, takes a completely different path. The sage doesn't chase dizzying happiness. The sage simply strategizes to avoid grief. Striving for less misery, rather than maximum pleasure, is actually the most reliable way to find real peace. And for the sage, true character is deeply rooted in compassion. Schopenhauer strongly believed that compassion is the absolute basis of morality. In fact, he argued this is so deeply embedded in us that a person's treatment of animals is a flawless litmus test for their soul. To him, it is absolutely safe to say that someone who is cruel to animals simply cannot be a kind person. It just reveals a fundamental lack of the empathy required to be a decent human being.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Section 4, the power of solitude, finding contentment once you successfully navigated the external world.
So once you've successfully dodged the traps of wealth and managed your expectations of people, solitude is where the mind actually gets to work. And he made this brilliant distinction regarding intellect. Talent is great. It hits a target that no one else can hit. It's high-level execution, right? But genius? Genius hits a target that no one else can even see. It perceives things that are totally invisible to the ordinary crowd. But here's the catch. You absolutely cannot hit a target no one else can see if you're constantly surrounded by the noise and the opinions of the crowd. Which leads perfectly to this beautiful visual metaphor. He wrote that great men are like eagles, building their nest on some lofty solitude. Now, it's not about being antisocial. It's about recognizing that a person can only be completely, truly themselves while they are alone. The very moment we enter society, we put on masks. Solitude is that lofty height where you can finally take the mask off and cultivate your own genius, totally free from those scolding rams below. So the crucial point is this. It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. I mean, this is the ultimate secret to grounded contentment. Stop looking for it in the seawater of wealth, or in the chatter of polite society, or in the constant validation of others. Look, it's really hard work to cultivate a rich inner life, but Schopenhauer is telling us unequivocally that it is the only place true happiness actually exists. And understanding this is a lifelong process. If we trace the timeline of human perspective, Schopenhauer notes that in our youth, life appears as an endless future. We genuinely think we have all the time in the world to figure the whole thing out. But by the time we hit our first 40 years, we've essentially written the text of our life, the actions, the mistakes, the foundation. The next 30 years? That's just the commentary supplied on the text. Old age is really just that short, reflective period where we analyze the story we've already written. And as you write that text and supply that commentary, I want to leave you with this final, incredibly provocative thought to frame the whole thing. Schopenhauer reminds us that after your death, you will simply be exactly what you were before your birth, a state of nothingness. So, knowing that we are just a brief episode between two eternities of silence, why spend your incredibly short life agonizing over what you don't have? If you stop obsessing over what you lack and start finding peace in the solitude of your own mind, you know what? You just might beat the pendulum after all.